this Poway Unified School Bond measure that's coming. And we already had one person in the live stream commenting on this earlier, and that was Steve Moz, and he said, "I hope someone has a solution to the Poway Unified School District school debt bomb." Well, there's more talk, more discussion about this, and so let's break this down. Now, last week we talked about a news article that came out in our local NBC Channel 7 news, talking about the infrastructure problem at Poway Unified Schools with roofs leaking and there's safety issues, and they're right. And it was kind of setting the stage for a school bond, which I told you, I'm predicting it's going to come. We had a school bond measure fail in 2020, largely, I think, because people are still angry about the $1 billion bond that went down about 10 years ago, where the school district borrowed roughly $100 million and agreed to pay it back with $1 billion, roughly, over the course of 20 years. And that's a bond that they've already spent the money, and we haven't even started making payments on that money. We won't even start making those payments, I think, until 2033, or is it 32? It's one of those. I think it's 33. And then it'll go on for 20 years. So the money they spent on that $1 billion bond has been spent. We haven't made payments on it yet, but the money's been spent, and already those upgrades are failing, and they need more money to fix the upgrades they were supposed to fix 10 years ago. So a op-ed came out in PalmeradoNews.com, which is the website that covers the Poway News Chieftain and the Rancho Bernardo News Journal. It's like our local newspaper here. And it was an op-ed from PUSD Superintendent Marian Kim-Phelps. And it was titled, "Back to School, Is the B Word a Bad Word?" And I saw this headline, and I wasn't even thinking about the bond, because you usually think about a B word means something else, right? And generally that is a bad word. But then I opened up the article and I went, oh, okay, we're talking about the bond. So this is Marian Kim-Phelps. And again, a lot of these articles are from the Union Tribune or from local newspapers, and I include all the links in the show notes. But Phelps said, "Nothing elicits groans among Poway taxpayers like the B word, bond measure. After the previous school district administration's bad bond deal in 2011, voters have been reluctant to vote for another bond measure." It's true. It's very true. Because in the 2020 bond, I think they needed 55% to pass it, and they ended up only getting 52 or 53. So in the past, school bonds used to get in the low 60s. But remember, they could never pass it even back then. This was like 20 years ago, because they needed a 2/3 majority. But now, they ended up being able to change the rules. So school bonds only need a 55%. But support for the bond was lessened because people are still bitter about the $1 billion bond. And I count myself as one of those. So according to Phelps, recently NBC7 did a news story on this fact, showing how badly things are deteriorating at some of our schools. Roofs are leaking onto students and teachers in the classroom. Drains are backing up and flooding locker rooms. And she's right. That's true. That's happening at Poway High, the locker room flooding, the drains not working. The media, community members, family, even staff were shocked. And I remember there was some of this when they were preparing for the 2020 bond that failed. They were showing pictures of some of this failing infrastructure. And they're not lying. I mean, there is a need to fix these things. But it makes you wonder, why in the heck wasn't this fixed with the money that they spent on the $1 billion bond? Or if it was fixed with the money they spent on the $1 billion bond, why did it fail so quickly and they have to fix it again? Now, I think the gyms, locker, and everything at Poway High School, my understanding is that the $1 billion bond money did not address the Poway High locker room problem. They were spending on other things. My understanding was they did a lot of re-roofing, because no one wants classrooms to be leaking water. But already now they are. And it just makes you wonder, how in the heck could this happen? And Phelps goes on to say, this is not from neglect. This is not from financial mismanagement. Rather, this is from a lack of funding. The district receives, boldface underline, the district receives no funding for school facility upgrades and modernization needs from the state. Instead, the state asks local communities to pass bond measures to fund their local school buildings. Well, that's not entirely true. See, the Poway Unified School District gets roughly $500 million, $500 million a year to run the school, to run all 39 schools. And that pays for, traditionally, it pays for the salaries of teachers and staff members and counselors and food service workers and bus drivers and maintenance guys. And it covers, all their benefits, health care, dental care, pensions. And then it covers a lot of other things like, books and school supplies and the like. And that money keeps going up. They keep getting more and more money from the state. And what they've been doing is paying their employees, paying the teachers more and more. And, and do they deserve more money? Perhaps, probably. I mean, with inflation going up. But what they've done is they've rewarded the employees at the expense of other things. There's money in the budget. There's $500 million a year in that budget that they can spend however they want, including on making upgrades to repair roofs. They're already doing that now. I'll get into that. So to say that they get no funding, boldface underline, for school facility upgrades is not true. Now, the paradigm has traditionally been that they'll go to the voters with a bond measure, but they don't have to do that. They can pay for it out of that bond. I mean, out of their annual budget. I even said if they just took 10% of that budget, which is roughly about $50 million a year, and allocated that over 20 years, that's $1 billion in money that could be allocated for this. They could self-finance it, $50 million a year in upgrades, or they can go out and secure their own loan and pay it back over 20 years out of that $50 million a year payment. Perhaps they secure an $800 million loan, pay it back with $1 billion over 20 years. They can do that. I mean, $50 million a year is just 10% of their overall budget. That's what Jack Welch, when he was the CEO at General Electric, he used to talk about finding ways to identify and cut the bottom 10% to find efficiencies. And there are things they can do. They can outsource their trucking. I mean, just yesterday I was on Ted Williams Parkway, and what's the school there? Is it Shoal Creek, I think? No, I don't think it's Shoal Creek. It's some other school that's there right off of Ted Williams where they built the overpass. And I see a Poway Unified School truck coming, it's delivering supplies, maybe food, I don't know. But those are trucks that are owned by the school district, being driven by school district employees who are paid reasonably well, but they also have that long-term pension obligation with every one of those employees. Whereas if they found a third party to outsource the trucking to someone else, then they can better manage, better control that expense. They don't have the long-term obligation for the pension program or for the health benefits and a lot of other things. And they can set up a competitive bid process to try to maximize their savings. And there's a lot of other aspects of the school district that could be outsourced like this. Now, I'm not talking about teachers, but I'm talking about IT, payroll, trucking, warehousing, maybe even food services. A lot of this could be outsourced to save money, to create space in the budget they could use to pay for this bond. But the bond measure is coming. There's already talk of this, and it's going to be coming. So Matthew Brannigan on the live stream says, the B word, it's illegitimate either way. Okay, well, there are a lot of people that support having a bond. I mean, remember last time they had 52, 53% of the populace voted for it. And I think that was if I'm trying to remember, was it like $400 million, $500 million they were considering borrowing? But now they're talking about borrowing a lot more. like 1 billion, 1.5 billion. In fact, in one of the surveys that they put out to the people, they asked them, how much would you be willing to borrow in order to vote yes on a bond? So they're really trying to get their ducks in a row, and this is coming. And they have legitimate problems with the infrastructure in these schools. The question is how are they going to fund it? She said, Phelps in the op-ed said, the funds generated from those previous bonds have all been spent. Yeah, that's true. The money has all been spent, but we haven't yet started making payments. So if you're a property owner here in the Poway Unified School District, particularly if you're on the east side of the 15 where there's no Mello-Roos, we got all the upgrades, but we haven't even started paying. We're not going to start paying until 10 years from now, like 2033. It'll go until, I think, roughly 2052. We're going to see a line item on our property tax bill that we pay every April. Was it every April and every November, if I recall? We're going to have a line item there that's going to be hundreds, if not thousands of dollars a month, depending on the value of your property. Excuse me, hundreds to thousands per year. So I said that wrong. Per year, depending on the value of your property, to fund this school bond. And so now if they come with a new school bond, we already got one layer of payments that are going to start in the 2030s. There's another potential layer that could probably start even sooner. Is that right? Is that proper management? Now, this is where Phelps went on to say, Poway Unified has devoted millions of dollars in general fund money, which is that's the $500 million a year operating budget, roughly $500 million. Has devoted millions of dollars in general funds to the maintenance and upkeep of 41 campuses. Just a few examples in recent years include $300,000 to replaster Poway High's pool, $600,000 in parking lot repairs at Canyon View and Los Penasquitos Elementary, $1 million roofing job at Twin Peaks Middle School, another $1.2 million paint job at Highland Ranch Elementary, and a $10 million heating, ventilation, and air conditioning overhaul at Bernardo Heights and Rancho Bernardo High School. Yeah, that was the big one in the news. So they're already doing that. They're already funding upgrades and infrastructure improvements out of the general fund now. Why can't they just continue to do that? And then it's also interesting if roofs are leaking, I mean, that's obviously a serious problem. But why would you, like they said here, they're spending money to upgrade a parking lot at Canyon View and Penasquitos Elementary and to do a paint job at Highland Ranch Elementary? I mean, what's more important? Fixing the leaking roofs or repainting a school? So, I mean, a lot of this has to come down to priorities. But I know what they're trying to do is they want to pass the bond so they can get the money to make all these fixes, which I get it. But what they're really doing, the unsaid thing here, is that they're leaving as much money as they can to pay the teachers and pay the other employees and pay the top management who are making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, more and more money. So what they're doing here is they're trying to look like they're altruistic, but in fact, they're really trying to pursue their own self-interest without really saying it straight up that way. So let's go on with what the article had to say. Phelps goes on to say, it's just a matter of time until all the major systems at all our schools eventually fail. Okay, a little bit of catastrophization, if that's a word. And yeah, some things are going to fail because they're not being kept up. Like the air conditioning at Rancho Bernardo High School and at Bernardo Heights Middle School. I mean, that was ridiculous. It was in a heat wave and the air conditioning wasn't working. They had to send kids home because it wasn't safe. You would think that school safety would be one of their highest priorities. But again, they want to deflect it. Now, they had to fund the air conditioning immediately out of the operating budget. I know they didn't want to do that. They would rather have given that money to the teachers. so they can be paid more. So then the teachers could return the favor and endorse the school board incumbents so they can get reelected. And then a happy quid pro quo relationship can continue. So Phelps goes on to say, and as more and more general funds have to be diverted to fix facilities instead of funding programs, the quality of our children's education will suffer. The children. What she should have said is that as more and more general funds have to be diverted to fix facilities instead of funding programs, we'll be unable to reward our employees as much as we would like to. So what they want is to have their cake and to eat it too. They want to be able to reward their employees to the maximum, which I get. I understand that. I mean, a lot of them deserve it. But then they want to essentially deflect and offload a lot of this upgrades to infrastructure that legitimately need to be made and put that back on the taxpayers who are already feeling angry about the previous bond. And that we haven't even started paying on that. And now they're going to add another layer of payments. And you're like, well, what the heck? You know, why is it that we have to pay for this when you guys are in a position when you can tighten your belt and optimize your budget and you can make it work? So Phelps goes on to say, so we are asking for your help to build a better future for our children, our schools, and our community. And she goes on to say that they have made changes to the way that they manage their finances at Poway Unified, and they have. Gosh, probably about 10 to 15 years ago, there was a lot of mismanagement, particularly under the John Collins era when he was superintendent. It wasn't just the $1 billion bond, but there was embezzlement of money and a lot of fraud of vacation time and a lot of other things, a lot of unscrupulous things going down at the school district. Fortunately, he's gone. The school board members that passed the $1 billion bond, they're all gone. That's good. And they've made some changes. You know, they've optimized some of the other special tax bonds and general obligation bonds to essentially refinance them to save money. They're going through a lot of procedures to optimize their credit rating so they can pay lower rates. And they're finding ways to be a lot more transparent and open with the public with their budget. That's good. And they're kind of like saying, well, don't blame us. It was the other guys. It was the previous regime, John Collins and all the previous school board members that screwed it up. So don't blame us. Okay, I understand that. But, you know, the taxpayers are the ones that have to pay for this. We're already paying for the guys that screw it up, and now we got to pay more. So I know I have a problem with that. So she goes on to say, following the mistakes of the previous administration, our public demanded we do better, and we have. And as our Board of Education explores whether to place a bond measure on the 2024 ballot, we pledge to earn back voters' trust and continue our transparency. Okay. And I bet, and they are doing that. I'll give them credit there. They are doing that. They have improved. You know, there was a serious structural deficit there for a while, about 8 years ago, because of mismanagement of finances. I don't know what the status of that is now. I know they're getting more money from the state, particularly in COVID, they got a lot more money. And whenever the state is enjoying a bit of extra cash, a lot of times the governor will kind of spread the love and give more money to schools. And that's certainly helped them. But are they really looking at this innovatively? Are they looking at ways to sort of restructure the way they do business? That they essentially can have a lot of these services that are provided to the school district for a lower price, particularly if they outsource it. And if they did, would that clear enough space in the budget that they could self-finance their own infrastructure improvements? I think they can. I mean, it wasn't too long ago what their school budget was over $100 million a year less than what they're getting now. They were getting like 300 something million. Now they're getting close to 500 million. So we'll see. I predict there'll be a bond measure on the ballot in 2024. Even Phelps is admitting that they're considering it. And it's probably going to be something that we'll see, I would assume, on the presidential ballot, which will be in November of 2024. So more will be coming on this. Okay. If you want to, we're talking about Poway schools. I got a website that I'd love to tell you about. It's called PowayIsAwesome.com. If you go to PowayIsAwesome.com, you can get all kinds of, backgrounds for your phone, wallpaper that shows photos of Lake Poway, of Iron Mountain, of Old Poway Park. And they work on iPhones, on Androids. They're perfectly sized for that. There's other versions that work great on a tablet or on a desktop computer. So if you go to PowayIsAwesome.com, you just sign up, put your email there. You'll get a free downloads, and you can enjoy those screen backgrounds that showcase the city of Poway. So I hope you get a chance to try that out.